On behalf of the Board of Directors and our club staff, thank you for joining us for this 7th annual Hall of Fame dinner. Tonight is not just an opportunity to celebrate our Hall of Fame inductees. It is also a night to recognize great journalism and the impact that great journalism has made in Georgia, the United States, and even the world. So with that in mind, the Atlanta Press Club has developed a Journalism Matters campaign to proactively address the impact of journalism. The Atlanta Press Club, almost 600 members strong, values diversity of opinion, civil discourse, and constructive criticism of institutions. These are hallmarks of a free society, and journalists serve a key role in advancing these values. So if you agree that this is a worthy endeavor, we ask you to visit our website and make your support known. We are stronger with all of you. Already, by being in this hall tonight, it is clear that you value this amazing roster of Hall of Famers who have lived the mission to the fullest and serve as an example of what we are at our best. As you will see shortly, their body of work proves without a doubt that journalism matters. Thank you. Christy Paul is the weekend anchor for CNN's Newsday. She is also a weekday anchor and reporter for HLN. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Christy Paul.
It is a historical time in journalism, and it's so nice to be here to talk to you about something really wonderful instead of hurricanes and fires and Saturday and Sunday morning tweets that turn everything upside down. It's incredible to be here with you people. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It succeed because of the peculiar sound of my voice.
Aubrey Morris, this native of Roswell, Georgia, this University of Georgia journalism graduate who had already covered some of the biggest stories in Atlanta during his 13 years with the Journal, including the horrific Winecoff Hotel fire in 1946. Aubrey Morris became the archetype of broadcast journalist who followed. He was armed with the deepest sources and with persistence.
Had printer's ink running through his veins, but he was the newsman's newsman.
Competitors sprang up.
Please welcome the host of Atlanta's Morning News on WSB Radio, Scott Slade.
Aubrey was yanked out of a church service the morning that the Orly plane crash occurred in 1962. No one else could do that story. I don't know if you know how important that story was. On that plane was the heart of Atlanta's philanthropic and artistic community. It was decimated in that one crash. Aubrey Morris was the only reporter there within the next day to cover it live. Aubrey had a great talent of using what he had, and one of those things was his voice. Here's an example. Aubrey got a tip that Gustav, the King of Sweden, was playing golf at Eastlake. He saw the king's entourage and yelled, "Hey, king!" Gustav looked up and said, "I have to go investigate this." Aubrey got a scoop. His first question, "Tell me, king, how did you do in that last hole?" Aubrey once told me he was with a gaggle of reporters in downtown Atlanta when President Lyndon Johnson was in town. A whole group of reporters. Johnson had popped out of a building, I don't know which one it was, in downtown Atlanta. And here comes Aubrey. "Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President." Johnson stopped in his tracks. And Aubrey tells me this story, it's true, as far as I know. Johnson stopped at his tracks and said, "I have to go find out what that is." LBJ walked over to the line of reporters, and Aubrey had a microphone in his hand. He became the first reporter in America to record a doubt that the Vietnam War was winnable. That happened that day. He said, "Mr. President, when are our boys coming home?" And Johnson looked very thoughtful and said, The situation is dire. I don't know that we can win this war. Aubrey got the scoop. Carter was at the old white columns getting ready to go on national television to announce the failure of the hostage rescue mission one morning. Before 7 o'clock in the morning, Aubrey got wind of it and went downstairs to the men's room where Mr. Carter was in a stall, to be quite honest. Aubrey began arguing with the Secret Service outside that he had to speak to the president. From inside the bathroom, inside a stall, things got quiet for a second, and the President of the United States said, "Aubrey, is that you?" He was invited into the restroom, where Aubrey got another scoop. He was on the air on WSB radio 10 minutes before the president was on national news announcing the failure of the Iranian hostage rescue mission. Aubrey used what he had, that wonderful voice. If Aubrey was here, he would probably say one of the most important days in his life, if not the most important, was the day when he met a Grady Hospital nurse named Tara, who became the love of his life and his wife for many, many years. She has just celebrated her 90th birthday, ladies and gentlemen. She is here with us this evening, and I would like to invite Tara Morris and her daughter Rhoda Owens up to the stage to receive the Atlanta Press Club Hall of Fame Award for Aubrey Morris.
Good evening to all of you. I'm so glad to see you, many old friends. It's good to be here. Thank you to the Atlanta Press Club for honoring my husband, Aubrey Morris, the late Aubrey Morris, as a new member of the group of prestige journalists of Atlanta. Thank you very much for being here today. My daddy was a man of many character qualities, such as loyalty, commitment, truthfulness, devotion, and thoroughness. Yes, I know he was also dogmatic, pushy, domineering, and pugnacious. All great attributes of a newsman and a news director. Personally, I'm glad Aubrey Morris, former WSB radio news director, newsman, friend of Atlanta, and my daddy, thank you Atlanta Press Club for recognizing, posthumously, I'll get it right, honoring him tonight. Thank you very much.
Next inductee spent several years at the Atlanta Constitution before moving to the Wall Street Journal. We cannot go without saying he is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author for general nonfiction. Our next inductee this evening, Doug Blackman.
About private contractors at Atlanta's airport who were bribing Atlanta City Council members to get those contracts. Blackman started breaking stories about the scandal and about the federal investigation and trial that ended with 2 council members and 6 other city officials going to prison. After the guilty verdicts, as federal prosecutor Sally Yates was commenting to reporters,
well, we believe it was probably a combination of the testimony of Harold Eccles and the corroborating.
there was Blackman, whose reporting helped reveal it all from the very beginning.
So I think that was sort of building on a legacy of enterprising coverage, investigative work that the newspaper had always been proud of and known for.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome former Acting Attorney General Sally Yates.
When I first got to know Doug, he was a young reporter at the AJC, and I was a relatively new prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Atlanta. And Doug was covering what would later come to be known as the airport corruption scandal. But Doug wasn't just following us around and reporting on what we were investigating. Doug was investigating it himself, going through slugs of records and contracts and developing sources and pulling at a thread that would ultimately reveal systemic corruption in our city. At the age of 12, he penned his first newspaper story, not for a school paper, as you might expect, but instead for his hometown weekly, the Leland Progress. While he was the editor of his college paper at Hendrix College, he uncovered then that the university, the college, was investing in businesses who were doing business in South Africa. And this was back in the mid-90s when apartheid was still in full force and Nelson Mandela was still in prison. And Doug's stories even then prompted sit-ins and demonstrations and ultimately a change in the college's investment program. Not too long ago, Doug returned to his alma mater to give the commencement address there. An address that was so powerful, I asked my own recent college graduate to read it and to contemplate its message.
Thank you very much. I think we can all just leave now, or at least I can. I don't need to, but thank you very much, Sally. That I can't tell you what, I mean, just the honor of having you be here tonight and share those words is enough. There's no greater American patriot that any of you will ever meet than Sally Yates. Let me just say very quickly, if I can, that I decided it would be fun to invite to be at a table near me and my wife Michelle tonight, a circle of folks who are by no means all of the people who have had great influence on me over the last 30 years in Atlanta in journalism. I was a little boy in the first grade in a little town in Mississippi who didn't learn to read as well as I should have. And so at the end of first grade, my mother, who was a school teacher herself, but at the end of first grade, when they were considering whether to hold me back, it's always a good story, the Pulitzer Prize winner who couldn't read. But instead of holding me back, she took the Jack and Jill reader that I had not been able to master in the first grade, which I still have. And over the summer after that first grade year, she sat with me every day, read with me, made me read. She taught me to read. She was no ordinary person. He is no ordinary person, and but in particular in the world that I grew up in a little town in rural Mississippi, she and my father both, they were fresh off the farm people who came into adulthood freighted with all of the same baggage that almost all white people coming off the farm were freighted with in those days. They had their own views about race that they had never challenged or views they had never considered, but they were no ordinary white people because they were willing to reconsider so much of the world around them, and they insisted that I and my brothers do the same thing. I wrote an essay about a civil rights incident that had occurred in 1965, where a group of black families went on strike against a plantation right on the edge of our town, and ultimately formed an encampment that became a place called Strike City. And those strikers, in fact, there's one of them left who's still out there living in that same place. And so I wrote a little essay about that story, childish thing really, in 1977. I then was one of the winners of the essay contest, went to the county fair for the award ceremony. It was the first time I ever received any note of distinction for my writing. Got to the county fair. When I introduced myself to the organizer, she looked at me with a combination of surprise and horror. And I don't know if I realized it instantly or if it came to me later, but the combination of that in her minds, because I went to a public school. Schools had finally integrated in Mississippi, and I was still in the public schools as almost no white children were. And so in her mind, I was a kid from an all-black school who'd written on a topic that only black people would have discussed in that time, and the oddity of my last name. I was supposed to be the black kid getting a prize that morning. So you can count me as the first white child you've ever known of to exploit somebody else's affirmative action. But
All right, our next inductee earned his spot in the Atlanta Press Club Hall of Fame for his reporting in sports. You know, ladies and gentlemen, Fred Khalil.
Khalil, an aspiring athlete who had deep inside of him
We've got a kickoff return. Let's get it right here.
an innate love of sports
You are watching Indiana Zone, Wish TV.
and journalism.
Now, Mike Ahern, Debbie Knox, Fred Khalil.
Fred Khalil's calling. It would take him on a lifelong journey, and he was a natural.
All right. So Madison Heights now leads at 27-19. We were talking about golf here.
Quickly becoming a champion.
I couldn't believe that kid ran the touchdown back right in front of us.
Knowledgeable, insightful, unique.
Lately, some of the best fights have been in baseball, and unfortunately, some of the worst fights have been in the boxing ring.
And more hard-hitting at times than the athletes.
Watch. Dukes told the media he took a dive.
I want to introduce to you CEO of the Atlanta Falcons, Rich McKay.
I'm not sure professional wrestling is in your calling. So I want to point out to you, first of all, I am jacked to be here and not have to speak about stadiums. I've been doing that for the last 4 years, and I refuse to talk about it anymore. I want to thank the Press Club, though, because I get to go to a lot of events that are of this type, that honor a lot of different people, but this is a really cool and unique event in which you're telling stories and talking about individuals within this craft, and it's impressive. Doug's story is impressive. Sally getting up and presenting in the way she did is impressive. Aubrey's story is more than impressive. So I am just pleased to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. To Fred, right? So Fred's pretty easy to figure out. If you just look in your program, you have your little thing that he wrote. Fred wrote this about himself. And the beauty of it is where Fred actually says, he says this, while playing football at Indiana University. What does that mean, while playing football? Doesn't that mean you actually ran on the field? Because then it says, comma, Coach Lee Corso encouraged Khalil to pursue reporting over football. That is a very unique way to go about saying that. I think what in essence happened, because I've asked Coach Corso this story, and he's very clear. Sometimes Lee's not 100% clear, but he's 100% clear on this. He says very clearly that Fred said, I have a conflict with some spring practices because I'm trying to do this internship, and I just want, if I could miss a couple practices, and he said, truthfully said, Fred, I have seen you play and I have seen you practice, and I think you need to do that internship full time. So that is point number one on Fred. So he's a fantastic writer. Just don't trust everything that you read about him. Secondly, I would say that what's fantastic about Fred is that he is recovered from a brain tumor that is a miraculous story. Heck, you have somebody that's written a note and given this to us to congratulate him, and it's an incredible recovery. And when you see Fred and hear from Fred, I'm sure he'll talk about that. I think the incredible thing too is the way that they must have implanted a chip in his brain for the teleprompter reading. He is the most fantastic teleprompter reading I have ever seen in my life. He reads fast, and I'm convinced it must have happened post-surgery. So for that, I give him credit, and he's a really good guy. So it's my pleasure to introduce Fred Khalil into the Atlanta Press Club Hall of Fame.
You know, when I first got into sports, I had somebody tell me, Phil Alvidrez out in Phoenix, Arizona, he said, Freddie, look, have fun. It's sports. It's not brain surgery. And I thought, who knew I'd get to do both? Pretty good. But I really want to thank my incredible family, my wife, Carla, of 31 years next week. She's probably getting more than I am. Our children, Alex and Devin, came in from out of town. Alex with her husband, Cody. Thank you so much. You know, you talked about the brain surgery. Well, after brain surgery, I had seizures. So when you have seizures, for some reason, they won't let you drive. I don't know why, right? But anyway, Big Swole drove me to work when I couldn't drive. So I think that, thank you so much. Give it up for like a year or so. And in the 25 years, I have to say, I've covered 9 Falcons coaches, 7 Hawks coaches, 5 Thrashers coaches, 4 Tech coaches, and 4 UGA coaches, and I've had 12 news directors in that time. So there we go, all right. But as you heard, I'm an IU graduate. I walked on and played for Lee Corso. Coach let me walk on, but I had to be carried off. That was a problem, you know. But, you know, as you said, I had a chance to host a TV show. Rich said this, heading into my junior season. I remember meeting with Coach Corso, you know, and I said, you know, Coach, I've got a chance to do this. What do you think? He goes, you got to do the TV. I said, really, Coach? He goes, yeah, you can't play. I said, and I just hung my head. I said, but Coach, he goes, no, Freddie, he goes, look at you, Freddie, look. He goes, you're small, you're slow, but you know, but you're good. I've seen you on TV, you're good, you can be good. And all of the photographers, the news producers, the co-workers over the years who've helped along the way, into the Atlantic Press Club for this honor. I mean, I can't believe it. I'm in the Hall of Fame. I cannot believe that. And we're not the Phoenix Sports, good night, everybody.
Our final induction tonight goes to someone who spent most of her career writing editorials for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, earning a Pulitzer Prize for commentary. Please welcome the video for Cynthia Tucker.
She can look back now. She can look back and see how her moral and political compass was beginning to calibrate. During her childhood, during her tender years in the segregated South in the 1950s and 60s. Cynthia Tucker, born and reared in Monroeville, Alabama. The same hometown, she is proud to say, as another writer, author Harper Lee.
It was a sin to kill a mockingbird.
Who modeled much of To Kill a Mockingbird on her own experiences growing up in Monroeville, a trailblazer of gender and race.
She had quite a historic role.
With all the praise, prestige, and headaches that would come with it.
Because everybody black expected her to support everything black, no matter what it was.
But Tucker took Andrew Young to task in one of her columns for a controversial comment he once made. And Tucker's columns and editorials criticized Martin Luther King's children repeatedly for the way they were managing or mismanaging the King Center and King's legacy.
She never lacked courage, and she never lacked talent in articulating her understanding.
And here to tell us more about Cynthia, of course, the legendary anchor for WSB-TV and 2013 Hall of Fame inductee, one Miss Monica Pearson.
Playwright and poet Atlanta's Pearl Clegg wrote in her novel, What Looks Like Crazy on an Ordinary Day, discomfort is always a necessary part of enlightenment. Cynthia Tucker, through her copious research and incisive writing, cut to the core of issues that made her readers squirm, scream, or support. But all were enlightened as she stirred the pot. That was her job for 17 years as the editor of the editorial page of first the Atlanta Constitution and then the combined Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She was the first woman and the first African American to hold that position, 24 years after Harmon Perry became the first African American reporter on either paper. A professor and a progressive. I describe her as the conscience of a generation. Ladies and gentlemen, Cynthia Tucker.
do want to say thank you to the Atlanta Press Club for this tremendous honor. I also want to say thank you to my friends and former colleagues who are here with me this evening to celebrate. I had some awesome colleagues at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, people who were hardworking, loyal, supportive, and did their best to keep me out of trouble. They didn't always succeed, but they tried.
The birthers, a lightning rod for critics, especially conservative ones, especially this one, who once ruled that roost on the right.
One of the most intellectually dishonest journalists in the country is Cynthia Tucker.
It's the kind of attack Tucker's predecessors at the Constitution, including anti-segregationist Ralph McGill, endured as well.
I was always stirring things up a little bit. I was Neil Bortz's favorite subject 2 or 3 times a week. There was that time that the Fox host that you just saw, what's his name? The Fox. Bill O'Reilly sent two people to ambush me in my driveway. And I immediately called my colleague and friend Jay Bookman, and I said, "You will not believe what happened to me." So I am grateful to my friends and colleagues, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention my dear friend Valerie Boyd, who got me through my 3 years of teaching at the University of Georgia.
It was in 2007 when Cynthia Tucker's moral and political compass guiding her to this moment of enduring praise and recognition, winning the Pulitzer Prize for commentary. As the jury declared, for her courageous, clear-headed columns that evince a strong sense of morality and persuasive knowledge of the community.
Thank you so very much for honoring me tonight.
Oh my goodness. I think collectively, we just want to say to each of you, thank you for your courage. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your dedication. You are an encouragement to all of us, a reminder to all of us why we do what we do, why we have to be dedicated to it the way that you were, why we have to take risks, why we have to find our courage. And it is because of you that we get to do what we do. And we will try to live up to the standard. Thank you so much. Let's give them all a round of applause again, please.